Zachipedia, and today we're going to be discussing the English Civil War. Now, the English Civil War seems like almost a unique war conflict, for it didn't really accomplish what it was promised to accomplish. Now, the English Civil War officially began in 1642, when an English member of Parliament named Oliver Cromwell gathered up a group of many supporters to fight for him, called the Roundheads, in order to overthrow the monarch of England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, named King Charles I. Now, there were many reasons behind this. The main reason that they made publicly was that Oliver Cromwell and many people at the time decided that they wanted to overthrow the monarchy and instead replace Great Britain and make it a parliamentary or representative democracy, which is when the people elect professional politicians to run their country or parts of the country for the best interests of the people and not just themselves. Now, the other reason, which was not very publicly made known until after Oliver Cromwell was able to defeat Charles, was when the fact that Oliver Cromwell was a Puritan, or a very, 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 very strict Protestant. And now, at the time, England, or the official religion of Great Britain, was Protestantism, which is a form of Christianity in which people accept the Bible but not the Pope. Now, it had been like this since the beginning of Queen Elizabeth I's reign, who was the first official Protestant monarch, not counting her older brother, Edward VI, and instated it as the official religion and made sure that it was secure. Now, though every other monarch after her was officially Protestant, or practically Protestant, up until Oliver Cromwell, Charles I, though he was a registered Protestant, began acting almost very Catholic. For one thing, he gave great consent to Catholics, and did not conduct them of heresy or going against the Christian church, and also ended up marrying the French princess, Henrietta, who was actually a Catholic. Now, this upset many Protestants, and especially Oliver Cromwell and the Roundheads, who were extremely strict Protestants. Now, this war raged on for about 7 years, going from all the way to London, to Greenwich, all the way to Bosworth, where the War of the Roses took place, the final battle. Now, at first, it seemed as if the Cavaliers, or the people in favor of the king, were going to win. However, towards the end, the Roundheads ended up getting lots of support from the people. Now, one of the reasons why they thought originally that the Cavaliers were going to win were because they were getting support from other monarchies, which was predominantly the system of ruling the government in Europe, as it had been for almost 7 centuries. Now, the Roundheads, on the other hand, weren't getting any other foreign aid from any other countries except the ones that they were getting from most of the people, which is what was most successful, as they knew the land better than anyone. Now, at first, the monarchy of Charles I was actually a pretty good one. Charles did lots of good things for the people, and now it's believed that though Charles wasn't officially Catholic, he wasn't really officially Protestant either. It's believed that unlike his father and many other of his predecessors, who were all very religious, mostly Catholic, Charles is believed to not have been that religious, even though people usually were, and he studied greatly in theology. It's believed that he only cared about being the King of England, and didn't really think that religion was a big part of that. But of course, that didn't make him very popular with his subjects, and they tried to have him overthrown. Now, the war raged on until about 1649, when the Roundheads captured King Charles I. Now, even though the war technically continued for another 2 years, it was practically in favor by the Roundheads by then. Now, Charles I stood trial, though it probably wasn't the fairest trial, and sure enough, he was condemned to death and executed. Now, when he was executed, his children, Prince Charles and Prince James, who were the future King Charles II and King James II of England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, ended up going into exile in France and the Netherlands. Now, Oliver Cromwell then became the Prime Minister of Great Britain. And he, though, at first, it was supposed to be an elected position, and most of the people paraded him into the country as the new leader, claiming that he was going to get rid of the monarchy, as he did, and was going to found a new democratic way of government. However, that's not really what happened. For though democracy had been known and was already inputted in many parts of the world for almost 2,000 years, it was not very popular in Europe, especially in that area back then. And so Oliver Cromwell was really just the King of England and Great Britain in everything but name. For what happened is that he ended up becoming dictator, or he ended up having absolute power, even though he still had a parliament, and he ended up becoming Prime Minister for life. And he named his son Robert Cromwell the descendant and the future Prime Minister after his death. So really, it was practically a monarchy, just the thing that they were trying to overthrow. Now, what happened was that, not only that, but Oliver Cromwell began using his absolute power almost immediately. He wanted to ensure that the country was entirely Protestant with no remnants of Catholicism. And so he instituted not just a Protestant, but now a Puritan way of life, to where he thought that things like fun, Christmas, presents, sports, theater, and things like that distracted people from thinking what was really important, getting to heaven. And so he thought that it was not worshiping Christ. And so instead, he banned practically fun, and he banned anything that basically he thought sidetracked people from going to church, which he included Christmas, because he believed that was a sinful way. Music and presents and celebrating and joy was a sinful way to celebrate the birth of Christ, and instead required everyone by law to go to church on that day. Now, of course, though some Puritans did enjoy this, as they had his same ideology, most of the people were not very happy with him. However, anyone who resented going back to the monarchs, which were many people, including his own cousins, were all executed by beheading or hanging in some cases. Now, this made him very feared. And, however, in 1658, he finally died at the age of 59, leaving his Puritan son, Robert Cromwell, as the leader. Though he was a Puritan and was very like his father, he wasn't as strict as Oliver Cromwell, and began letting things be a little more lenient. Nevertheless, the people still wanted a monarch, and they believed that Robert was not a good example of that, and that he was still imposing a Puritan regime. Therefore, King Charles I's son, his eldest living son, King Charles II, ended up coming and led a rebellion, which was supported by most of the people, and he overthrew and killed Robert Cromwell. Now, this was called the Monarchy Restoration, in which the monarchy was restored, and Prince Charles was named King Charles II of England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland, also known as Great Britain. Now, after this basically became a monarchy, and it still is a monarchy until this day. And people paraded even the partying Charles back into the crown because of the not-so-good regime that Oliver Cromwell and the Cromwell family imposed on Great Britain. Now, though after the 1700s, Great Britain, or the United Kingdom, as it later became known then, became a constitutional monarchy in which the king didn't have any power at all, was mainly a figurehead, and was the head of state and the head of government, was given to a parliament or a government. Now, this really explains the fact that the English Civil War didn't really have that really great benefits. The only really good benefit was the fact of a lesson, that it got people to really appreciate their monarchs. For before, monarchs were probably not liked, as they thought that they were being forced against their will to rule them, even if they were good, and that they were only given by divine right. However, this finally made many Englishmen and just people realize that the monarchs weren't all bad, and that even democracy can be botched. Now, I hope you really learned a lot about the English Civil War,